He raised the champagne flute toward the chandelier and said my name like a dare, and I swear the room changed temperature. To Clara, my stepbrother announced into the mic, smiling like he'd won something, whose fairy tale night was paid for with money that didn't belong to her. The laughter died so fast you could hear the ice settle in glasses. I remember my husband's hand tightening around mine, the clink of a fork on ceramic going silent, my mother's face turning the color of old paper. And while we're finally telling the truth, he added, voice sweet and confident, maybe we talk about how this family's been lying for years. About love, about blood. The mic squealed, my name seemed to float in the air like a balloon no one wanted to pop, and I stood there as the room waited for me to either smile it off or watch my life crack down the middle. My name is Clara, and I'm from Cleveland. The funny thing about a crisis is that you can feel the shape of it before it arrives, like the way you can smell rain on hot pavement. The week before my wedding smelled like that. But if you'd asked me 6 months earlier, my life looked so ordinary it would have made a quiet indie film. I was 30 managing content at a mid-sized healthcare startup that still had sticky notes on its glass walls and an espresso machine that made more noise than coffee. I had a calendar full of client calls, a closet with a surprising number of navy blazers, and a fiancé who made a mean omelet on Sundays. Our apartment overlooked a grocery store parking lot and a maple tree that turned ridiculous shades of red in the fall. On weeknights, we argued about little things, whose turn it was to take out the trash, whether cilantro tastes like soap, and then curled up on a thrift store couch to watch cooking shows we never made recipes from. I liked the certainty of it. A full fridge. A healthy basil plant that kept somehow refusing to die on the windowsill. A Pinterest board full of wedding ideas that were about fairy lights and not family landmines. My mother, Monica, lives on the west side, in a 3-bedroom house that still has the floral wallpaper from the 90s in the upstairs bathroom. She married my stepfather, Alan, when I was 12. He was the guy who always tucked in his shirt, who made lists for his lists, who showed up to my middle school band concert with a camcorder the size of a loaf of bread and genuine enthusiasm. He had a son, Tyler, older than me by 2 years, with a smile that could sell you anything and eyes that always looked like they were calculating something. We were Brady Bunch close, but we made it work. Family is a series of compromises that you call love. That's what my therapist says, or what I tell myself. Tyler and I hovered around each other through high school like magnets that occasionally clicked and mostly didn't. He played soccer and flirted his way through algebra. I wrote for the school paper and taped concert tickets to my mirror. When we both left for college, the truce of distance kicked in. You can get along with almost anyone if you only see them on holidays. The years after that were a blur of jobs and moves and forced air heating and holiday dinners spent commenting on the softness of roles to avoid talking about anything real. Then I met Ethan, and suddenly there was something real we had to talk about. The day I introduced Ethan to my family, the snow was doing that thing where it looks gentle until you realize it's turning the freeway into an ice rink. We were late, my mother's roast was chewy, and everyone smiled too wide. Tyler hugged me like he was squeezing juice from a lemon and clapped Ethan on the back so hard it seemed like a joke. "So you're the guy," he said, all teeth. "Welcome to the circus." Ethan, who grew up with 2 sisters and parents who communicated with sticky notes on the fridge, didn't flinch. He told Tyler he liked his watch. Tyler said it was a gift from a client. Then he glanced at me for a fraction of a second too long, like he wanted me to notice something but not say it. It was small, one of those moments you'd forget if it didn't become a thread you'd later pull until the whole sweater unraveled. You measure people by the little ways they move around a room. Tyler never sat with his back to a door. He always placed his phone face down on the table like it was a sleeping baby you didn't want to disturb. He refilled your glass before you realized it was empty and made sure everyone noticed. For years, I told myself he wanted attention because his dad gave it to me in easy ways: rides to practice, a steady presence at games, a real effort with my teenage moods. I told myself Tyler's sharpness was hunger. I forgot that hungry people sometimes bite. Wedding planning brings out everyone's sincerest feelings disguised as opinions on table linens. My mother cried at the idea of fake flowers. My stepfather wanted to know if the caterer had insurance. Tyler volunteered to help with music and then suggested a DJ he knew from the industry. He never defined what the industry was. When I asked him about the fee, he shrugged and said he'd take care of the guy. It's a phrase that can mean generosity or debt, depending on who's saying it. Ethan's eyebrows met in the middle when I told him. "We should just hire a vendor and get a contract," he said, and he was right. I told Tyler gently that we'd found someone through a planner. He smiled and said, "Whatever you want, little sis," but the ends of his mouth didn't move. It was a month before the wedding when the first real crack appeared. I was at my mom's, trying to decide between ivory and cream napkins, which is a decision no one should be forced to make, when Tyler came by to drop off a box of candles. My mom and Alan were at the dentist. He wandered into the kitchen like he lived there, took a swig from a water bottle in the fridge, and leaned against the counter. "You look tired," he said, which is something men say to women when they want to put them on the defensive. I told him planning was a full-time job. He nodded like he understood and then said, conversationally, "Must be nice having Dad cover most of it." I blinked. What? He tilted his head toward the corkboard covered in menus. I saw the spreadsheet, payments, transfers. He said it like weather. I felt my stomach drop. My mom had insisted on contributing. Alan had insisted on doing what family does. I hadn't asked for a line by line. I was grateful. I was guilty. But the way Tyler said it made it sound like I was stealing. He wanted to help, I said. Tyler's mouth made a sympathetic shape. Sure, still, that's a chunk. Guess my college fund wasn't as sacred as he said. He tapped his fingers on the counter, 3 quick taps. Kidding, he added, but it didn't feel like a joke. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening to Ethan breathe. "Do you think it's too much?" I whispered. "The wedding, the money." He reached for my hand without opening his eyes. "Your mom and Alan offered. We're contributing what we can. We're not exploiting anyone, Clara." Tyler made it sound. I stopped. Ethan opened his eyes. The streetlight made a slow-moving rectangle on the ceiling. "Tyler likes pressure," he said, and the softness in his voice made it not an insult but a diagnosis. "He wants you to feel like you owe him, or him by proxy, you don't." I wish I could say I let it go. I didn't. The next week I took my mom to lunch at a diner with cracked vinyl booths and a waitress who called everyone honey. I asked about the budget. My mom's eyes did the thing where they get shiny but don't spill. "Alan wanted to," she said. "He said we didn't help with college and this was our time." She laughed a little at that. I told him you'd hate that he said it like a prize, but it made him happy. I asked if it was a lot. She waved her hand. "We'll be fine." It's amazing how a sentence can sound like reassurance and denial, depending on your angle. The catalyst came 2 weeks before the wedding, the day my boss asked me to present to a new client in Detroit about our platform's data transparency. I've never loved public speaking, but I know my slides. The morning of the pitch, I walked into our conference room with a blazer I'd steamed in the bathroom and my favorite pen. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You sure you want a big audience, Clara? People might have questions you can't answer." There was a link. I didn't click it. I put my phone face down, thought of Tyler's habit, and talked about audit trails for 45 minutes. When we got the contract, my boss hugged me and the CFO bought cupcakes. In the bathroom, under fluorescent lights that make everyone look like a ghost, I clicked the link. It was a PDF of a bank statement. Alan's name, a transfer to a catering company, another to a venue, then one more from an account labeled education savings. The date on that one made my skin prickle. It was from last year. I scrolled. There were notes. Little lines of commentary highlighted in yellow. "Must be nice." The text came again. "Still want to toast a family?" I didn't have proof it was Tyler, but the instinct you get after years of slippery comments is a kind of proof. I called Ethan. He left work and met me at a coffee shop that smelled like cinnamon and ambition. I showed him the screenshots with my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. He didn't say "I told you so." He said, "We're going to breathe, then we're going to ask questions." He asked if I wanted to go to Alan. I said I didn't want to accuse my stepfather of anything. He asked if I wanted to talk to my mom. I said I didn't want to make her feel like she'd done something wrong by accepting help. He squeezed my hand and said, "Okay." Then we wait and we document. In the days after, Tyler called me twice about coordination. He wanted to know when the photographer was arriving. He asked if he should prepare a slideshow. He texted a photo of us as kids, me wearing a Halloween crown, him dressed as a pirate, both of us making faces like we weren't sure the camera was safe. I said the photographer would be there at 3. I said no slideshow. He sent a thumbs up and a winking face. My phone lit up with little bubbles where things could be said and weren't. I started to notice patterns. Tyler's jokes about who paid for what, the way he brought up the word family like a toll you pay to keep driving. The secret plan didn't come to me all at once. It was a child's puzzle, big pieces that only fit if you could see the picture. I made folders on my laptop and called one reception just in case anyone saw it. I asked Ethan to start a spreadsheet, not because I wanted to become an accountant, but because numbers can anchor you when everything else feels floaty. I took screenshots of every text. I stopped clicking links. I met my friend and maid of honor, Jess, at a bar with sticky floors and told her everything. She listened, eyes getting narrow in that way she has when she thinks someone is lying, and then said, If he's going to pull something, you need a plan for when, not if. We called my Aunt Ruth, my mother's older sister, who is brilliant at two things: casseroles and strategy. She's the person who brings extra safety pins to weddings and has snacks in her purse for emergencies that include bad boyfriends and low blood sugar. I told her about the text without accusing anyone. She made a small sound, the kind that's half sigh and half swear word, and said, "If a man wants to embarrass you, he won't do it alone. He'll want an audience." I told her we couldn't bar Tyler from the wedding. She said, "You don't need to bar him, you need to be ready." Ready looked like this. I called the venue manager, Mara, and told her I had a guest who liked to be the center of attention. "Don't worry," she said, "we've seen it all." I asked for a handheld mic for speeches instead of the podium. I asked if we could cut power to the mic quickly if needed. She said yes, casually, like people request that all the time. We arranged a signal. Jess would touch her necklace if we needed to intervene. We asked the DJ to keep the playlist tight and to take cues only from me or Jess. We rehearsed what I would say if things went wrong. I practiced in my head while brushing my teeth. I wrote a version that was witty. I wrote one that was angry. I wrote one that was just the truth. The truth felt like the heaviest. I still didn't know the whole of it. The bigger secret was a shadow with edges I couldn't see. 2 days before the wedding, I stopped by my mom's to drop off place cards. She was in the dining room with a shoebox full of photos. "I found your baby book," she said, and I smiled because baby books are safe. Then she handed me an envelope that wasn't safe at all. It was addressed in familiar handwriting to no one. I recognized the loops in the letters instantly, my mother S when she was younger and trying to be fancy. Inside were 5 letters tied with a ribbon. Only the first was dated. 19 years ago. The ink was faded, but the words were alive. "Dear A," it began. "Sometimes we make choices and then the choices make us." My stomach flipped. I put the ribbon back around the letters like I could tie time shut. "I shouldn't have given you those," my mom said, panic rising. "They were in the wrong box there from before." She reached for them and then stopped herself, hands hovering. "Did Alan ever see these?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, they were never sent." She looked so small for a moment that I wanted to put her in my pocket. "Clara," she said, voice very soft, "your father, your biological father, was a kind man who wasn't ready to be a father. Alan is the man who raised you." I nodded, heart pounding like it was trying to be heard. "Does Tyler know?" I asked. She closed her eyes. "I don't think so. I've never told anyone, except Ruth. And Alan, of course." I walked to my car with the envelope in my bag like it was a live wire. In the driveway, I ran into Tyler. He was balancing a box of votives on his hip and smiling like we were in on a joke together. "You okay?" he asked. I said I was fine. He looked at my bag. "Heavy," he observed. Then he leaned in, just close enough that I could smell the clean laundry scent of his shirt, and said, "You know secrets have a way of showing up to parties." It shouldn't have sounded like a threat. It did. The night before the wedding, Ethan and I stayed at a hotel near the venue with a view of a river that looked black in the late summer night. Jess came up to our room with a garment bag and a bottle of something sparkling no one drank. "You have everything?" she asked. I checked for the 10th time. Vows, rings, shoes, lipstick, charger. The envelope with the letters sat in the room safe because I didn't trust the universe not to make the sprinklers go off if I put it anywhere else. "What's your line?" Jess asked. We decided I should have one line, a sentence to anchor everything if it went sideways. "I'm ready," I said. "That's not a line," she said. I took a breath. "If the truth shows up uninvited," I recited, "I'm not going to hide under the table." She smiled. "That's better." I didn't sleep much. At 4 in the morning, I sat in the bathroom so I wouldn't wake Ethan and read the first letter. I won't repeat it all here, but it was honest in the way people are honest when they think no one will ever read their words. My mother wrote about the way it felt to be 28 and scared, about the man she loved who loved her in a way that wouldn't survive a mortgage and 2 car payments, about the day she met Alan and felt, for the first time in a long time, like someone was building a shelf under her life so it wouldn't slide off the counter. She wrote about me in the abstract, like a wish. She didn't write anything cruel. She wrote like a person choosing a path and then walking it. I put the letter back in the envelope and went back to bed. Ethan rolled toward me and put his hand on my back, and I thought, this is the shelf I built for myself. If you've ever been a bride, you know the morning is full of small tasks and big feelings. Hairpins like tiny decisions. Lip gloss that makes you feel like you can say anything. My mother cried the way water boils, quietly at first, then hard. "You look like you," she said, and it was the best thing anyone could have said. Alan hugged me and made a dad joke about not tripping. Tyler arrived late and kissed my cheek like it was a dare. He looked expensive, like everything he wore had been borrowed from a friend with better taste. He handed Jess a gift bag and told the photographer he had great candids from the bachelor party. which was a lie because Ethan's bachelor party was pizza and mini golf. I watched the way he moved around people, the way he polished his words until they could cut. The ceremony was sun and vows, and that feeling you get when everyone who knows you is looking at you at the same time. It felt like standing under a waterfall and not drowning. Ethan's voice wobbled. Mine didn't. We said yes to a future that felt both familiar and sparklingly new. When the officiant said, "You may kiss," I forgot anyone else existed. For a moment, everything was perfect. I didn't think about bank statements or letters or microphones. Then there was the reception. Candles in hurricane jars. A DJ who pronounced my name right. Little triangles of cheese on marble boards. Aunt Ruth at a table near the front, eyes on me like we were doing a heist. Mara, the venue manager, floating near the sound booth like a guardian angel with a headset. My mother in a dress that made her look like the safest place in a storm. Alan standing tall in a suit that had seen graduations and funerals, and now this. Tyler by the bar, rotating through conversations like a planet with too many moons. The speeches started. Jess told a story about how I once tried to dye my own hair and ended up with a stripe of orange like a caution cone. Ethan's best man made a joke about spreadsheets. People laughed. Glasses clinked. I started to believe we'd make it to the dancing, to the frosting smear on my cheek, to the part where you can finally breathe. Tyler tapped his glass with a fork and stepped onto the little stage before anyone could announce him. He didn't look at me. He looked at the crowd like a comedian about to start a set he'd perfected in private. "I'm not on the program," he began, and a few people chuckled on instinct. "But family gets certain privileges." He drew out the word, savoring it. He told a story about babysitting me once when I was 13 and burned popcorn. People laughed because he was funny when he wanted to be. Then he said, "Clara is the kind of person who believes in honesty, so I think she'll appreciate a little of it tonight." The smile on his face wasn't funny anymore. He lifted the champagne flute. To Clara, whose fairy tale night was paid for with money that didn't belong to her. That's when the room tilted. He talked about sacrifices. He talked about what we owe. He said words like respect and blood like they were knives on the table we could all see. He started to say there were letters. He glanced at my mother and paused, savoring the win. For a second, time became a tightrope. Here is where I tell you that fear is not the same thing as helplessness. I was terrified, but I was not helpless. Jess caught my eye and touched her necklace once, a question. I shook my head. It wasn't time to cut his mic, not yet. Tyler kept talking, a slow pour of poison. "Sometimes," he said, "we put on a show for people we love and forget that show's end. The tab comes due." He looked at Alan and then at me. "Isn't that right, sis?" I stood, my chair legs made a sound like a scrape on stone, and that was enough to make people look. I didn't grab for the mic. I didn't rush him. I walked to the front like I was going to thank him. Ethan's hand was on my back for one heartbeat, and then I was alone in the space between my stepbrother and the people I loved. "Thank you, Tyler," I said, "for being so concerned about the bill." The room laughed, relieved for a second because people always want an escape hatch. I let them have it, then I took it away. "Since we're being honest," I said, and I watched the way Tyler's jaw tightened at the word we. "Let's tell the truth. This wedding was paid for by a lot of people. By my mom's early mornings and late nights. By Alan's steady hands. By me and Ethan, who have been saving since we got engaged because we know this isn't the best or the worst thing we'll pay for together. And yes, Alan contributed more than he should have, because he loves us, and because he thinks love is a verb you show with a checkbook as well as a hug." I felt my mother's breath catch across the room. I put my hand over my heart because I needed to feel the beat. "But the money from the education account?" I said, and now you could feel the room lean in. "That wasn't for this wedding. That was paid back last year to cover a gap created by someone else." Tyler's smile tried to hold. It failed. "What are you talking about?" he said, almost casual. I looked at him and didn't blink. "I'm talking about the withdrawals you made with Dad's authorization when your investment went sideways. The one you told him you'd pay back when the deal closed. The one that didn't close." Someone near the bar made a soft sound like a cup set down too fast. I didn't blink. "I'm talking about how you texted me from a number I don't have in my contacts with bank statements you shouldn't have had, hoping I'd panic. I'm talking about how you know how to make an audience and forgot I also know how to make a plan." The mic in Tyler's hand picked up the sound of his breath. He looked at Alan like a child who wants a referee call. Alan was very still. My mother had her hand over her mouth. Aunt Ruth sat up straighter like she'd been waiting for a plot twist and finally got it. "You're lying," Tyler said, but his voice didn't have the confidence it had a minute before. "You're making me the bad guy on your big day." "You did that to yourself," I said, and there it was, the line I hadn't practiced but had always known. "But I'm not going to let you make my mother the villain of a story she wrote with integrity, and I'm not letting you use the word family like a weapon." I looked at Alan and then at my mother. There are letters, I said, because hiding wasn't protecting anyone anymore. They're not scandal. They're not a smoking gun. They're a record of fear and love from before I was born. Alan knew. He chose us. That's what family is. Choices you make again and again, even when the story could be different. I turned to Tyler. You overheard a piece and decided it was the whole. You wanted to hurt me because you felt owed, but you're not owed my humiliation. There was a hush like the inside of a seashell. Tyler opened his mouth and closed it. I didn't wait for him. I turned slightly to address the room, hands steady at my sides. Tonight is about joy. If anyone needs to talk about finances or history, we can do that tomorrow with coffee and daylight. For now, I'm going to dance with my husband. I looked back at Tyler. You can join us or you can go, but you don't get to do this here. For a second, I didn't know what would happen. Then Alan stood up. It was simple, a man rising from a chair, but it felt like a bridge being built. Ty, he said just that, and the way he said it contained years. Tyler stared at him and then at me. The mask he wore every day, the one made of charm and timing, slid. Something raw and startled showed through. He shoved the mic toward Mara, almost hitting her, and walked out. The door thudded behind him, the kind of sound you feel in your bones. I took Ethan's hand and exhaled like I hadn't breathed in months. The DJ did the smartest thing he could have done and started the song we'd picked for our first dance. It felt absurd and perfect to sway under string lights after that, to press my cheek to Ethan's chest and hear his heart like a metronome. People watched us like the ending of a movie, where you're not sure if the couple will make it, and then they do. In the corner of my eye, I saw my mother crying into Aunt Ruth's shoulder with a broken kind of relief. Alan stood alone, looking at the door. I knew this was not over, but I also knew we had taken the thing that was supposed to break me and turned it into a boundary. After the song, people exhaled into conversation like air back into a balloon. Plates clinked. Someone laughed too loudly because that's what we do when pressure is released, we fill the space. Jess materialized at my elbow with a glass of water like I'd just run a marathon. You okay? She asked. Ask me tomorrow, I said. Ethan squeezed my fingers and went to talk to the DJ. My mother approached me with the careful gait of someone approaching a wild animal. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I hugged her and said, no, enough apologies, we're going to talk, but you don't owe me shame. She shook in my arms like a small bird. Alan came over. He looked older than he had that morning, like the day had weighed a decade. I should have told him earlier, he said, about the letters, about the money. I thought of all the times we protect people from information and call it kindness. Maybe, I said, but he shouldn't have done that. He nodded. No, he agreed. He shouldn't, he swallowed. I'll handle him. We'll handle him, I corrected, because I had just married into a life where the we mattered as much as the I. The rest of the reception was both exactly what a reception should be and not at all. We cut the cake. Someone smeared frosting on my nose, and the crowd cheered like this was the ritual that would make us safe. People danced. Aunt Ruth shocked everyone by knowing all the words to a rap song from the early 2000s. I took photos with friends and with relatives who whispered, I'm proud of you, in my ear like a blessing. Once, I slipped into the hallway near the bathrooms and leaned my head against cool brick. Jess found me, of course. Do you want me to go after him? She asked. I shook my head. He wants a chase, I said. I'm not giving him one. The aftermath started the moment the lights came up. Tyler didn't come back. He texted me at 2 in the morning. You think you won? That's the kind of text people send when they want to reroute the story. I put my phone on airplane mode and slept like a person who has taken off a heavy backpack she didn't realize she was wearing. In the morning, the river looked like possibility again. Ethan and I ate reheated room service pancakes in bed and made jokes that weren't funny but felt like medicine. When we finally checked our phones, there were messages. Some from relatives who were furious, some from relatives who wanted details, a novel-length text from an aunt who loves drama like oxygen. There was one from Alan asking if we could talk at noon. We said yes. We met at my mother's house. She had put a pot of coffee on so strong it could have walked to the table by itself. Alan sat at the head of the table like he always does for hard conversations because his face is easier to read in daylight. He told us about the education account. It had been for Tyler originally, years ago, and then for the grandkids, a nebulous fund with a generous name. Last year, Tyler came to him with an opportunity. He was persuasive, Alan said, and I thought about the way Tyler's eyes can make you feel like you've agreed to something you haven't. The deal went bad. The money was gone. Alan didn't tell my mother until it was too late to get it back. He pulled from his own savings to refill the pot. When the wedding came around, he covered more than he should have because he felt guilty. Guilt is expensive. We talked about the letters. Alan had known for years. They had been letters my mother wrote and never sent that he found when he was moving boxes one spring. He read them sitting on the floor of the spare room, he said, and cried like a teenager. He told my mother what he'd done, apologized, and then made a choice to stay in a story that was bigger than his hurt. I didn't tell Tyler, he said, because I didn't know how, because it didn't feel like my secret to give. We all stared at our coffee cups like they could give us a script. Tyler must have found something, my mother whispered, and the idea of him opening drawers with curious fingers made my skin crawl. I'm not going to pretend the next weeks were neat. Tyler could apologize. He didn't. He sent messages that were half justification, half attack. You don't understand pressure, he wrote. You're protected. It's strange how someone can look at your life and decide it's easy because the parts of your pain don't resemble theirs. I offered to meet with him at a public place to talk. He declined. Alan met with him alone. They fought. Alan's voice came back hoarse like he'd sanded his throat. He told me he'd asked Tyler to take a break from family events until he could be respectful. Tyler responded by posting a quote about truth-telling on his social media. I didn't engage. The internet is a funhouse mirror. You'll never like your reflection there when you're raw. Work became my safe place and my proving ground. The Detroit client loved our audit feature. Another pitched project landed in my lap, this one with a team that had been skeptical of a woman leading. A week after the wedding, I walked into a boardroom with my new last name on the calendar and delivered a presentation that felt like both a report and a promise. Afterward, one of the senior managers, a woman who wears bold lipstick and means it, pulled me aside. You have that thing, she said, swirling her finger vaguely. You don't rattle. I laughed because if only she knew. I started to wonder if what happened at the reception had given me a new skill, the ability to separate urgent from important. A comment in a meeting? Not important. A budget line that didn't add up? Important. A text from a stepbrother at midnight? Not urgent. A call from my mother at noon? Urgent enough. If there was a subplot in all of this, it was Jess. Not just as my maid of honor, but as a person with her own arc. She'd been with her boyfriend, Nate, for 3 years, long enough to know how he takes his coffee, not long enough to forget why she liked the coffee in the first place. The week after my wedding, Nate proposed. He did it at a park with a dog that wandered into the frame at the perfect moment like a casting agent had sent it. Jess said yes, then called me from the parking lot crying happy tears and also regular tears. Is it stupid that I'm scared? She asked. No, I said, it's normal. She told me she wanted to plan a small ceremony with pizza after and no speeches. We can make that happen, I said, and the thought of ensuring her night would be safe became a kind of mission. We started a checklist titled No Mic Surprises. We added things like a password with the DJ and a code phrase for me to whisker away if someone made a toast that felt rough. We decided on the code phrase, the basil plant needs watering. It made us both laugh. Tyler didn't go away. People like him rarely do. He contacted my biological father. I didn't know that was possible, but of course it was. The letters had enough breadcrumbs that a person with time and entitlement could follow them. He sent me a screenshot of an email he'd drafted and not sent, the subject line proof. He wrote that maybe the man would want to know about me, now that I was such a public figure. I snorted at that public figure, but the threat wasn't about publicity, it was about control. I considered calling him and begging him to stop. I considered calling him and threatening him back. Instead, I called my aunt. Let me tell you something about men who think secrets are currency, Aunt Ruth said. They always run out of money. She suggested I write my own email first, not to beat him to it, to own my life. I sat at my dining table with a cup of tea and wrote to a man whose eyes I might have, whose laugh I didn't know. I told him who I was. I told him I wasn't looking for a father. I told him I was grateful to Alan and loved my mother. I told him I was just making sure he knew that if he ever received a message claiming to be the truth about me from someone who was angry, he should know it wasn't the only truth. I clicked send and felt my hands stop shaking. He wrote back 2 days later. His email was short and careful. He said he was living in Oregon now, that he was happy, that he thought of my mother sometimes and hoped she was well. He said he was glad I had a good life and that he respected my boundaries, and if I ever wanted to talk, he would be there, but only if I wanted. I cried in a way that made my dog hide under the table. Ethan held me and said, "You did that, you chose your own story." When Tyler finally called me, it wasn't to apologize. It was because something in his life had cracked and he needed an audience. His deal, another one, had fallen through. He wanted Alan to make things right, which is code for cover the problem. He wanted me to intervene. I told him I would sit down with him and Alan and a financial advisor. He said I was turning family into business. I said no, I was turning chaos into a plan. He hung up on me. The confrontation you saw at my wedding wasn't the final one. The final one was less cinematic and more honest. It was at Alan's kitchen table, with a stack of bank statements and a legal pad and 3 cups of coffee going cold. It was Tyler sitting there with his knee bouncing, and the charm turned off because it didn't work in rooms without microphones. It was Alan saying, with a voice I had only heard when my grandfather died, "No, not to love, to enabling." It was me looking at Tyler and saying, "You can hate me if you want, but you cannot use me like a stage." It was a financial advisor, a woman with a neat bob and a voice that could cut through fog, explaining interest rates and consequences. It was silence like the settling of dust. Tyler stood up so fast his chair tipped. "You're all against me," he said. No one got up to argue. "You pushed us," I said, "and we didn't fall." He looked at me, really looked at me in a way he hasn't since we were teenagers. He opened his mouth, closed it, and left. He didn't slam the door this time. He just walked away. It was somehow harder. After that, the messages slowed. He sent one more at midnight one Friday. "I hope you're happy." I didn't reply. Happiness isn't a thing you steal from other people. It's a thing you build when you stop letting other people dictate the blueprint. A month later, I saw a photo of him on social media at a bar in a different city, smiling that same smile like it was glued on. I felt a wash of something that was quite anger and wasn't quite pity. I hoped he'd find a way to stop performing long enough to feel whatever that smile was hiding. As for me, I started sleeping again. I went to therapy every Wednesday after work and sat on a couch that made my legs stick to the cushion and told a kind woman with a bookshelf full of interesting titles about how it felt to be a daughter and a stepdaughter and a new wife, about letters and ledgers and the fear of microphones. She told me my nervous system had been on high alert for weeks and that it would take time to settle. She gave me exercises that felt silly and then helped anyway. She told me I did not have to be calm to be strong. I wrote that on a sticky note and put it on my mirror. Jess started planning her small wedding with pizza. We made a plan with the DJ and a safety net of code words. At her reception, when her cousin started to tell a story that was inching toward painful, Jess caught my eye and said, "The basil plant needs watering," and we clapped and redirected and no one ever knew. When we danced to a song from our freshman year of college, she leaned in and said, "We don't have to let the past rehearse at our parties." It sounded like something a therapist would needlepoint, but it was also true. My mother and I read the rest of the letters together on a Saturday afternoon, with sunshine slanting through the blinds and a plate of cookies we didn't touch. We cried and we laughed at a joke my mother made in one of them about how laundry multiplies at night. We put them back in the envelope and then into a box labeled Family Archives, because that felt dignified. We told the truth to the people who needed it and didn't perform for the ones who just wanted a show. Months later at Thanksgiving, Alan carved the turkey like he does, precise and generous. There was an empty chair. We acknowledged it without making the whole day about it. That's how grief works sometimes, acknowledgement without audience. We held hands and said what we were grateful for. When it was my turn, I said, "Boundaries?" People laughed. I didn't, I meant it. Ethan and I started a tradition of Sunday walks along the river. We talk about movies and whether we should get a second dog and how work is going. Sometimes we don't talk. Once we stopped on the bridge where the wind is always a little sharper and he said, "You know, I married a woman who can handle a microphone." I laughed. "I married a man who knows when to take my hand," I said. It felt like we both got promoted. You want a moral? People always do. I don't have an easy one. I have this. If someone tries to set your life on fire in public, you're allowed to put it out in public. You're allowed to say no, this is not the story we're telling today. You're allowed to plan for disasters that haven't happened and call it prudence instead of paranoia. You're allowed to love your complicated family without letting them use your happiness as a stage. And if the truth shows up uninvited, you don't have to hide under the table. You can stand, breathe, and speak your line. Then you can dance.